Hi guys, so today's video I'm going to go over the differences between iMovie and Final Cut and my opinion on when you should buy Final Cut. So iMovie, at least as far as I know, comes standard on most Macs after I would say like the year 2013. I could be wrong, but every single Mac that I've ever purchased has had it on it. So if you need to purchase it, I think it's pretty cheap. But you can check on Apple's website for that information. But if you do need an editor, I definitely recommend iMovie first. I learned on iMovie first when I first got my Mac, so it does take some time to learn each of these, but you'll get the hang of it. So basically, iMovie gives you your basic tools. You're able to edit your videos, and it's pretty simple. If you guys need information on how to edit or anything like that, I do have videos on that. Built into iMovie, you are only allowed to have one overlay at a time, so that's a major difference between iMovie and Final Cut, is that you can only have one overlay on top of your original video. So say for instance I wanted to have that picture and then I wanted to do something else. I can't do it. If I go here, it cuts it in half because it can only have one overlay at a time. That's a major difference between iMovie and Final Cut. And of course what you could do to get away with or get around this for iMovie is you can export it and then re-import it and then put another overlay on that, but that takes a lot more time and it is kind of a pain in the butt. So Final Cut is a little bit more like easier in that sense. iMovie also has some built-in effects. It has some transitions here, which you guys can see. There's a decent amount of transitions, however, Final Cut definitely has more. There's also titles here. And there is a big amount, and these are mainly the ones that are built into Final Cut as well. There are a few other different effects, and you could also, a major difference between iMovie and Final Cut is that Final Cut has plugins, which you probably have heard me if you've watched my channel before. I talk about Pixel Film Studios all the time. It's about $30 for each pack, but you're able to actually do a lot of really cool things with it, and you can kind of add on stuff as to what you want your videos to be, if that makes any sense. iMovie does not have plugins, so this is kind of what you're working with. Of course, you could do overlays and stuff like that, but then again, you're limited to only one overlay at a time. You could also add sound, which is, basic. There are some sound effects in iMovie, however, Final Cut does have a little bit more. Now let's go over here into kind of your other tools over here. So this is kind of your basic color stuff. It doesn't really have much. You can do the skin tone balance, white balance, all this stuff. I usually don't play with that too much, but Final Cut does have a little bit more than this. As far as your color correction, this is pretty basic. This is a pretty good option. Again, I'm going to say this over and over. I feel like a broken record. Final Cut does have a little bit more customization options, but, that's okay. As far as cropping is concerned, you cannot transform your photo. So you're allowed to fit, crop to fill, and do Ken burns, which Ken burns are kind of like if you ever seen someone zoom in, you could do that for that. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of all these things. I'm just kind of giving you the options that each of these have. However, in Final Cut Pro, you have a little bit more options. So if you wanted to tilt something, you can do that. However, here you can only either rotate it fully. You can't if you wanted it to be between any of these, you can't do that, which that is a thing I use all the time in Final Cut. This is your basic stabilization. Most people don't even use that. Your sound options, you really don't have too much. You have a little bit of options. Here you have your sound effects and reducing background noise. Pretty basic stuff. Here you can slow down and change the speed of these, which this is pretty much the same in Final Cut. Final Cut just has a little bit more options, but not too many, but basically the same stuff here. As far as effects are concerned, these are the effects that are in iMovie. Once I show you Final Cut Pro, you'll see that these are pretty limited, although this is a really good, starter option, and most people don't even use these effects anyway on YouTube, so it's really not that big of a deal. You also have your standard audio effects, which these are pretty much all that you're ever going to need. Final Cut does have a whole bunch, but no one really ever uses them, at least I never do. Those are basically your items in Final Cut. The biggest difference is that you can only have one overlay in iMovie, and also there's less options for customization of pretty much everything. No plugins, etc. But it is a lot cheaper, and most of the time does come free on a Mac. Now let's go ahead and look in Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro is a lot more complex. You have a lot more options here. So let me just show you really fast. So if you wanted to do multiple overlays, you can do that. So if you want that there, and then I have a green screen effect here, we could do that. you can do as many overlays as you would like, which is a really cool option. Another thing is that I tell people all the time is that Final Cut, if you're doing if you're using my green screen transitions, you can actually change the opacity of this white just by going into the video effects and going down to opacity. And iMovie really does not have that option. You kind of have to go all or nothing with my green screens. iMovie does have the green screen option, which I will show you here. If you go to video effect, or I'm sorry, cancel. If you go here and instead of cutaway, you can do green screen, blue screen, which that's not a green screen, but you guys get the point. However, you'd have to use it at full opacity. It'd have to be 100% white. Let's see what else I can say about this. Over here, let me just go over here. You have a whole bunch of different options with the color board. So as you saw before in iMovie, it's kind of a simplistic design, but you have a lot more control of your color adjustments in Final Cut, which most people that are on YouTube don't actually color correct, so I wouldn't worry about that option too much. I think the biggest benefit is all the video effects that come standard in Final Cut Pro. So you guys see all of these here. This is just all of them. A lot more than iMovie. In addition, you do have the option to have plugins. I have a few from Pixel Film Studios. Here's ProDub, which is what I use to make all of my kaleidoscope effects. Another thing is you can have your same music, etc. You can speed up and slow down a clip. Let me show you the differences here. You have slow, you can do 50, 25, 10, fast, and then you can do all of these other different things. Reverse clip, which you can also do in Final Cut or in iMovie. But this has a whole bunch of different options that you can do. You can either do custom, etc. Not too much different than iMovie, but there are a little bit more options if that's something you're interested in. Then there's also transitions. Final Cut comes with a lot more transition options. I mean, there are a lot of the same ones, but some of them that are different are like the color panes or the color panels. You've probably seen those before. There's also Pixel Film Studios, which I do have a pack here called Trans Pack, that you could have these effects too, which iMovie does not have the ability to use these at all. So there's that. Also the text effects, pretty similar to iMovie, however there are a few differences. There's a little bit more complex ones. For example, this ink one comes standard. And then also I do have a few Pixel Film Studio ones. If you guys have ever seen, this is Pro Intro. It has all of these. And then we've also got Pro Ribbon Fold, which is the one where it's like it does itself. This is really, really popular, and this is not possible in iMovie unless you have a green screen of it, which it's illegal to share that. Then you also have your generators, etc. These are, basic things, but these are not available in iMovie. But that's pretty much the difference between Final Cut and iMovie. I say if you are serious about using, if you're serious about YouTube, I think you should have probably over 5,000 subscribers before you purchase Final Cut, in my opinion. Of course, if you have the money and you can afford it beforehand, go ahead and do that. It took me a really long time in order for me to get Final Cut. I used iMovie for quite a bit of time, and iMovie is fine. It's just a little bit harder if you want to do the multiple overlays, which now I think is pretty standard. For most YouTube channels are doing the multiple overlays and the pop-ups and everything like that. So that's pretty much the biggest thing that I would say for people that are, editing on YouTube and they're not professional, is that you could have the multiple overlays. If it's worth it, go ahead and buy it. Final Cut is about $300, at least in my country. But I know it's different for different countries. I'm not sure the prices. You guys can look it up. But yes, Final Cut Pro definitely is something that I think that if you are serious about YouTube, I think you should invest in it. If you've ever seen like anyone that's really, really popular on YouTube, they're using Final Cut Pro, whether it's a result of Final Cut Pro that they're getting subscribers, probably not. It's just that they've done so well that they think that they should invest in their, basically their company. So if you guys have any other questions, or if you want to leave your opinions down below, go ahead and do that. And again, these are only for Mac computers. I really don't know anything about editing on Windows. I do have a video on some options for Windows. However, I can't do tutorials because I don't have a Windows computer. So if you guys have any other questions, comments, concerns, etc., leave them down below, and I will do my best to answer any of your questions that you may have. Thanks, guys. Bye.